원래?
Hello everyone, so we're going to start the mission of God's people. So as I already explained before, this is actually the second book that Christopher Wright, the author, wrote. This is the extra versions to explain the 하나님의 선교, the Missio Day, and how we as the mission of God's people, like as a church, we can act out and carry out God's mission. That's the theme. So as you see, like I had originally planned to deal with all the odd numbers, but I am going to finish chapter 1 to chapter 8 because chapter 1 to 8, those are all Old Testament, and from chapter 9 to 15, these are New Testament. So until the first week of the December, so we're going to keep on reading chapter 1 to 8. And as you see, chapter 1 is who are we and what are we here for? It's about like mainly our identity and our mission. And part 2, when we arrived at answers, there are certain things from chapter 3, actually, from Genesis, we can deal with the theme, as a mission, as a missionary, the God's people. So how we are called and what are we going to do? So, like in Korean, 창조 세계를 돌보는 백성. So chapter 3 is the people who care for creation, and chapter 4, 열방의 복이 되는 백성, people who are a blessing to the nations. And chapter 5, people who walk in God's way, 하나님의 도를 행하는 백성. So from the Abraham, becoming a blessing to all nations. So we're going to broaden our perspective about mission. Actually, from chapter 1, we'll see the difference between mission and missions. And what we're going to do is chapter 1, we'll see our identity and the basic concepts and definitions. And then chapter 2, people who know the story they are part of. Chapter 1 and chapter 2, those are most important. So I don't want you to miss or skip the chapter 1 and 2 because chapter 1 explains the whole the story and redemption plan and basic key definitions we have to deal with it. And chapter 2, we're going to see from the creation to the recreation, creation, and then we committed our sin and fall, and then redemption and recreation. Those are the whole process of God's his mission. So we'll see, how as God's people we can involved in, his mission. So let's read from chapter 1, and when we finish it, chapter 8, or if you want to look through the whole Old Testament, how this book was created and arranged, then the best way is you can read interlude part. Interlude is a chapter 8b. So interlude part is the pause for thought. So this part is kind of the summary of the Old Testament. So then going back to chapter 1. Let's see. Anyone wants to read the first sentence? Chapter 1, who are we and what are we here for? Linda, can you read until the definition? Yeah.
Yeah. Mission of missions. The title of the book, The Missions of God's People, immediately sends a question to the top of the quote. It is a question of definition. What pops into our minds and when we see or heard the word?
Here, the word mission. Yeah.
Mission. Keep reading or not?
No. The first subsection is mission or missions. So when we think of mission, and we usually pop up the sort of idea of mission activities. So like for example, like in Korean we say 선교회, 전도 및 교회 개척, 장단기 선교사 로잔 운동. These are all missions. So according to the definition, here, like mission is God's mission. But missions, the plural form, that's mission activities. Because God is the one who sent the missionary, He is the origin of all the mission. So from his impulse, from his purpose, we started mission. So the mission is not a human's activities or like doing all kind of social work and evangelism and missional work. Those are missions. It's a missional activities. But we got to remember, God is the one who is sending missionaries to the world. And the Bible shows that God sending many people on a mission from God. So when we look at the book of Acts, it begins with the church responding to that divine impulse by sending Paul and Barnabas out on their first missionary journey. So we often think that mission can be done by the missionaries, but here maybe our old paradigm, our old perspective about the mission should be transformed and changed. Because here the Christopher Wright is saying that the sending, the mission is actually in Latin the meaning missio, that is a sending, send. That's the original meaning. Then God is the one who is sending people, like Joseph. He was sent. That was not with his intention, but unwittingly at first, to be positioned to save lives in famine. Because he was sent to the Egypt, he saved the whole Israel. His rest of his household. And Moses was sent. That was unwillingly, because he killed and he was running away from the Egyptian the royal family. And then God called him when he was about like 80, when he was very aged times. But then Elijah and Jeremiah and Jesus, they were all sent to his people. So they were different purpose, but they were coming from God. So it's not just they wanted to do some missionary work, but God sent them. And Barnabas, you see, Barnabas and Paul, they were also sent, and mainly what they were doing was they were helping those people in famine and church planting and evangelism. Those are the main activities what they were doing. And here, so like we've got to agree with the this concept, mission, missio, it's not from ourselves, not from the church itself, but that's motivation, that's the legitimate reasons why we have to reach out to people, why we do this mission is because God is the one who is sending, God is the initiator. That's the key point here. And then this part, Paul, can you read in the box? Paul.
Oh, yeah. It is not so much the case that God has a mission for his church in the world, as that God has a church for his mission in the world. Mission was not made for the church. The church was made for a mission, God's
Yes.
mission.
I'm going to read Korean version. 하나님은 자신의 교회를 위해 세상에 선교를 두신 것이 아니라 자신의 선교를 위해 교회를 두셨다. 선교가 교회를 위해 시작된 것이 아니다. So mission was not made for the church. 교회가 선교, 곧 하나님의 선교를 위해 시작된 것이다. So the church was made for mission, God's mission. So it's kind of, the reverse way. We've got to think in a different way, because we think that we are here because we have to do the God's mission, but God actually creates all the church and his people because there was a purpose. From the beginning, before we are all created, God has his own purpose. So we are just part of his redemption plan. So the reason why he's keep on focusing and emphasizing God's mission, because church herself cannot actually say, I do mission. We cannot just say, I do mission, I am the one, who is sending money, who is sending missionaries to all nations, because God is the one, who initiate all his this whole redemption plan. And when we look at the God's purpose, we've got to remember, so there is a purpose and some goal orientation. So when we read, even in the secular world, we talk about organizations having a corporate mission. So God, he himself already set the goal. So what is the mission of God's people? So in other way, we can say, for what purpose do those who call themselves the people of God actually exist? What are we here on earth for? So what's the purpose? Why we are here? The answer to that has to be, it is the mission of God. God himself has a mission. So God has a purpose and goal for his whole creation. Do you guys agree with this part? And Boram, can you read this the highlighted parts, the underlined part?
Mission arises from the heart of God himself and is communicated from the heart to ours. Mission is the global outreach of the global peoples, global God.
Yeah. You got to remember, mission that arises from the heart of God himself, and then that communicated to us, so we know God's heart. So because we know God wants to reach out those people, so that's why we react to him. So we obey, and we go to that unreached people, like Jonah, like Moses, because we know that God called us, because there was a God's purpose and his mission first. So singular and plural, as I already explained, here, like as we see, like for example, in science, there are so many activities can be included, like discovery, experimentation, explanation, and some sort of methods and a system of values. But when we say science, there are subcategories and there are activities. So there can be the sciences, like in the plural, we can see those aims and methods, criteria and controls, and all the physics and different departments of the science. So here his point is, when we talk about the mission is actually God's purpose and his own goal. But then under that there are so many missions. And he is pointing out very important things, but rather like the part of in Paul's description of the body. Here, one legitimate science cannot say to another, because you are not physics, you are not real science. So we cannot say, like in other words, like, yeah, I am doing social work, and you are doing some preservance of the ecosystem, like we do, like media bulletin, because we think that printing our bulletin is kind of damaging the ecology system. And maybe others saying, no, I am actually doing the church planting. And the other ministers or missionaries, they're saying, oh yeah, I am doing a medical mission. So all different parts of the activities, they are not the whole mission. Just they are the subsections of the mission. Then we cannot say that you are not the part of the mission. So his point is, so under the science, different physics and biology and all kinds of activities are belonging. So like under that mission, God's mission, all our mission activities can be included. So that's what he said. And can anyone read this part? So when I speak of mission, maybe Paul, can you read this part, the highlighted part?
Sorry.
Can you
So,
read?
when I speak of mission, I am thinking of all that God is doing in His great purpose for the whole of creation, and all that He calls us to do in cooperation with the purpose.
Yeah. So mission, like science, has a conceptual, generic breadth, and like a missional can be as broad in significance as scientific. But here there are more like activities. So what we are doing is just we are participate. Just we are joining God's mission. As a part of His agent. And he said, if everything is mission and everything is mission, maybe you have no idea, what's the meaning of, if everything is mission, then nothing is mission. Like some people kind of criticizing, like, think about it, the missionaries who are not directly evangelizing unreached people, but some are just doing sort of social work, or maybe teaching some taekwondo, or some sort of a sports mission. Then the others who are doing church planting or making people convert to Christianity directly, proclaim the message, they might say, yeah, what you're doing is not mission. So if everything is mission, then nothing is mission. That means 모든 게 선교면 선교가 아무것도 아닌 게 된다. But the author doesn't really like that kind of frame, that statement, because this frame, that statement actually originally from like Stephen Neal is one of the missiologists, and he's kind of good at like all the Christian history. So he wrote that sentence, but here he wants to give opposite meaning, and he said, if everything is mission, and I think everything is mission. So we've got to respect any of mission activities as a part of God's mission story. That's what he said. So that's what he emphasized. And the whole world, this is also an important part here because the whole world. So we are part of the creation story, and what is our mission or goal? And if anyone is asking, then we can answer that what we have to do is not only evangelize, not only just do the church planting, but what we can do is we can make our creation more sustainable, and we can also make people who are oppressed can be freed, and if they are poor, then we can make them abound. So the point is that when we talk about the God's mission and under His mission, and there are so many activities, then we can say in the world, in God's creation, there are so many parts we can engage in. So, like our church, we about a month, I think, for a month, we walk and we wear all the pink T-shirts together because we didn't want to see the high rate of suicide, because we know that people are killing and suiciding. So we want to prevent those social phenomena. So like by walking, so we paid it, and then we walk together, and how many kilometers we walk, that really impact to those people who wanted to save those the people, something like. So it's not directly related to the evangelism, but what we were doing, it's a part of mission. God's creation must be more sustainable, and His people must be more preserved. So it's not like preaching the sermon in the public place, but it's also a mission, and God's missionary work. And let's read this part. Boram, can you read? So we have to start. Can you read this paragraph? So we have to start.
We have to start by seeing ourselves with the great flow of God's mission. And we must make sure that our mission goals, long-term and more immediate, are in line with God's. For that purpose, we need to know the story. We are part of the great story that the Bible tells that encompasses the past and the future.
Yeah. So we are part of God's mission and His story, and so the whole world, the scope of our mission must be broadened and expanded. So it's not like reaching out the people, and also we can taking care of the creation. So that's the story, because God created the whole world. So I think our church is actually doing in every way, some different aspect of our missionary work we are engaged in, like pet service and preventing the rate of the suicide, and what else we'll do? It's a media mission. I think we are kind of doing all sorts of different missionary activities. So from God's perspective, what we are doing is some sort of participation in God's mission. So this is what Christopher writes. He's saying. So, but do we have a missionary responsibility beyond the level of moderately responsible living? And we are all
Hello.
conscious.
Good morning. I'm Luyện Thóm.
So we are all conscious of the ecological challenges that face the human race. So we may rightly feel confused in the welfare of the alleged facts and scary projections, not knowing how much is objective reality and how much is the result of the media fringe or political machinations. Nobody can seriously doubt that we face enormous global problems, but we may well differ widely over the best way forward from where we seem to have reached. Maybe like it can be a bit difficult, you probably think that restore the creation, restore the ecosystem. Is that really God's mission? Is that really church's mission? Maybe you can think, but in a broader sense, like in a broader perspective, we can think, even though that's not converting people, not evangelizing people, but it's the part of God's creation. So what we are doing is joining his mission. So traditionally, however, the concept of mission in Christian circles has been confined to the needs of human beings. But now we can think more about, the ecological concerns, 생태계의 어떤 어려움들, and we can also find some biblical, legitimate reasons or missional concerns about the animals and ecosystems and everything. So that's why, I think our church, what we are doing is slightly indirectly, what we are doing is missional work. But here we'll see. But usually, like in traditional way, what we think the mission is church planting and evangelism. So that's the main and core thing. But the other mission works and also included. So we want to kind of embrace, encompass all sorts of God's missionary work, and the whole world as the arena of our mission. Then we've got to think, where does missionary work begin and end? I wanted to emphasize this part because people may think, where is our mission field then? Because when we talk about mission and we think the mission field is important, and people usually think the mission field is foreign countries out there. But the Christopher Wright said, but not here at home. But he said, no, the reality is, as soon as you think seriously about it, then the mission field is everywhere. Do you guys agree with that? So mission field is not just out there or foreign countries far from here, but here, everywhere can be our mission field. So we've got to change, shift our paradigm. So everywhere, so even there is an ignorance or rejection of the gospel of Jesus Christ, so everywhere can be the mission field. And so mission is something either that specially commissioned Christians manage to do full time if they can get enough support to do so. That's traditional concept of mission. But here, what he's saying is that it's not only about short-term mission or the missionaries, their professional mission, but when we talk about mission here, under God's mission, all sorts of mission activities, that can be all embraced. And let's read this part. In what sense is that word the arena of the mission of God's people, and what does such mission consist of? Is it only the moments of evangelistic opportunity in that world, or can our work itself participate in God's mission? Lucy, can you read the box? Yeah, I think this is a quote from the lesson in New Begin, the missiologist.
The church must be seen as the companion of pilgrims on the way to the end of the world and the end of the earth.
Yeah. So, as a community, as a body of Christ, we think our community has a more diasporic, and as a pilgrims, we are on the way to the end of the world. So we are all moving. So people on the move. We are not just stayed and stuck to this reality, but we are always thinking that our identity, our identity is a pilgrimage. So like we are as a diasporas, we've got to think, living here is also the living in our mission field. So every day, each one of our day can be our mission day. Like it's not like when we go to overseas and when we set some different week, only for the missionary work, then that's the mission work, and the rest of my life, maybe think about 365 days in a year. Then maybe like if we reach out some of the unreached people and we go to some local mission, then we do missionary work. But the rest of my life, it's not that related to mission. So that's then what's the point? So Christopher Wright, he is saying that your everyday, your mission field is right there, and your working place, and also your neighborhood. Everywhere is a mission field, and what you are doing can be the missionary work. Why? Because what we proclaim, the word, how we deliver the message can be the part of the God's mission. But how we live out the gospel, as a being, 존재로서, how we live as a disciples, as a followers of Christ, how we live is also part of God's mission. So he called us to bless all the nations, but as missionary, our life itself is actually demonstrating God's love and his holiness. So like our character, our being, our presence, our existence itself is the mission. So that's what he said. So like people usually think in a traditional, old way, we think, when we do the missionary work, then we are doing missionary work. So we are part, a partake of God's mission. But here, the new paradigm, new perspective of thinking is every day, everywhere is your mission field, and you are live as a pilgrim, as a missionary. So don't think this is a sacred area and this is a profane area. 성과 속을 구분하는. This is kind of I do whatever I want, maybe in this part, but then the other rest of part, when I engage in church work, then I start to be very holy and religious, becoming more religious, and pretend to be more holy, but this is not a dichotomy thing, 이분법적으로. It's not kind of this is secular, this is a very holy place. So it's everywhere, and what we are doing is related to God's mission. And do these concepts figure in our biblical theology of mission? Yeah. I think. Sorry, like somewhere. So perhaps this sounds like the familiar debate about the relationship between evangelism and social action. But I hope that our study of biblical theology in the following chapters will take us beyond the traditional polarizing and prioritizing. So first chapter is mainly dealing with the new concept, new meaning of mission. And what about the people of God? Instead of saying, this book is actually the title, The Mission of God's People, then instead of saying, Mission of God's People, directly we can say, the book, the mission of God's people, not mission of God's people, like the church's mission, 교회의 선교. then why didn't he use church's mission? Why not have just used the book subtitled The Church's Mission? Well, he said, but only if we have got our biblical theology of the church straight. So when we think of church, maybe traditionally we think church is kind of the institutional church, 제도적 교회. It's more like church as a local church. But here, the group of people, the community, this is invisible, but church is actually functioning and taking some role as an agent of God's mission. And we, as God's people, we are people groups. It's not institution, it's not a building. So church, when we think of church's mission, in our old paradigm, we tend to think, church's mission is like what they're doing, as a church, as institution. But here, for many Christians, think that church, it's going back to the first century, like the book of Acts, because of the day of the Pentecost, church was started from the Jerusalem and Antioch and the other places. People usually think maybe that sort of thing. Then how does the existence and mission of these people relate to the mission of God in and for his word? So New Testament, we know that the Great Commission, at the end of the gospel, like Matthew and Mark and John, they all got a Great Commission. But not only they had that Great Commission, but Israel, like from the Old Testament, their history and their identity are all related to Israel, their existence, and their the reason why they were designed, why they were created from the beginning. God knows whole history of the Israel. Israel, they were the blessing to the all nations. And as we already look through it, like Moses, Isaiah, and Jeremiah, and all different missionaries, they were sent. But here, how many times you heard about the Old Testament, related to the mission? But usually people think, mission is only related to the Matthew or Mark, maybe Jesus. After Jesus, he gave that commission to his disciples, then the mission had started. That's what people think, usually. But the Christopher Wright, he's saying that God's mission, his purpose, his goal, his target was from the creation. God's mission was already started from the beginning when he created all the creation. That's what he said. So mission can be not only reach those unreached people, and not only the evangelized people, but being a holy nation, being a blessing to the all nations, as Israel. From the Old Testament, God's mission already had started. Can we read this part? So we need to think carefully about what the Bible as a whole has to say about what exactly are God's people, a people with a mission.
Can I read it? So we need to think carefully about what the Bible as a whole has to say about who exactly are God's people, and in what sense they are and always have been a people with a mission. That is why I make no apology for including so much exposition of Old Testament text in the chapters that follow. After all, the New Testament church did not actually have a New Testament when they set out on the task of world mission. It was the scriptures of the Old Testament that provided the motivation and justification for their missional practice, as well as the underlying theological assumptions and expectations that reassured them that what they were doing was biblical, as we would say.
Well, he's pointing out that at the first century, when the church was all planted, even in the overseas, they didn't have any texture. They didn't really have a New Testament. The scripture was later, written. Then how they got motivated? Because they knew that Old Testament, because the Peter and all the disciples, they already read the Old Testament, the Torah, and the prophets, because they knew that God had a purpose and Jesus sent them without any of the written text, but they were motivated and they thought reaching out those unreached people was a calling, was a mission, from God. So the reason why he is talking about this is because he doesn't want the church members confined, 제한하다. Confined. The mission is actually start from the first century, from the church. So the mission was initiated by God himself from the beginning of the creation. So don't ever think, if this is the Old Testament and New Testament, don't ever think, like the New Testament is a book of mission and Old Testament is just another thing. What he wants to explain is the Old Testament, New Testament, both are the book of God and both were written from God's heart to reach those unreached people and to sustain all his creation. From the beginning of God's creation and fall and redemption through Jesus and the recreation, like in the Revelation, whole history, universal, whole the creation history, God designed it, God predestined. So before our church acted out and carried out the mission, God already initiated his mission from the beginning, from the beginning of all the creation. That's what he's keep on emphasizing. And what we are doing, so as a God's people, we are just partake, we are joining some part of God's mission. So we cannot boast and ourselves and saying, our church is doing so many, missionary work, and we are sending, thousands of missionary, like. But Christopher Wright is kind of reminding us and re-examine ourselves and thinking that as a church, yeah, we can do church, we can do some missionary activities, but we are just under, God's whole redemption plan. Under his creation plan, we are just part of it. So that's what he said. So don't ever boast your missionary activities, mission works. So and what kind of people are we? And this is very important, significant part, because we actually deal with the mission and missions, plural and singular. What's the difference? That was the first subsection. And then God is the one who sent us, because mission in Latin, missio was the original meaning. So, and second, what we are dealing with was God's purpose and his goal from the beginning. He already predestined. That was the 하나님의 목적, God's purpose. And also what we learned was whole world, not only the overseas field, but whole world in everywhere is our mission field. And another thing, we are learning, the whole church, not only missionaries, professional career, those people are called missionaries, but we are God's agents. And as God's people who carry out God's mission, we are all missionaries. That's the new paradigm. Don't ever think missionaries are missionaries. So what they're doing is just their professional work. So we are just laymen and we are not ministers. So we cannot do mission. That's kind of dichotomy. 이분법적인 사고. It's like, oh yeah, missionaries that they're doing. We are just a normal secular people. Don't think in that way, because here, as God's people, so we are all called to be a blessing and to be holy as God's nation. And also our life should be, in every aspect of our life should be a missioner. 선교적이어야 하는. Our life should be all missioner. In every aspect, in every dimensions of our life should be a missioner. And here, and what kind of people are we? Yeah, we can Linda, can you read this part? What kind of person is your postman?
What kind of person is your postman? The question hardly seems to matter at the functional level. Whoever delivers mail to your address has a job to do, and the point is to make sure that the job gets done, not to worry about the morals of the person who does it. The man may have been cheating on his wife the night before, but so long as you get the mail next morning, so long as the message gets delivered to you, that doesn't matter to you.
So here, if we are just a mechanism, if we are just machine, we think, think about it, if we are just deliverer, how we live doesn't really matter to the receiver. Because your job is just delivering the message. Yeah, here this is the gospel, and soon, doesn't matter. Postman, he is giving a metaphor. 은유로 설명을 하고, he's explaining, like, think about it. Your postman, and doesn't matter. If he his job is done. Like if he delivers that letter or package to you, and his job done, then why that is important, to being a holy nation, to being blessing, how we live out the gospel, our life, why that is really matter to others. He's explaining that, getting the job done, that if missionary, it's just as a deliverer, or kind of mechanical way, if we just deliver and then we think, yeah, we all done, we carry out God's mission. So is that really true? He's thoughtful about that. If our mission is to share good news, and we need to be good news people, this is the important part. If you are the deliverer of good news, then you've got to be the good news. Your presence and your existence, your being, 너의 존재 자체가, should be the good news people. You got it? Like your character really matter. You are not just agent or a machine. Like just deliver. Yetta. Like this is not that kind of type of missionary. He's explaining. He said that God didn't call us as a just machine, delivery machine. We are not delivery machine. We are not a kupang man. We are not just kupang man, but we have difference. Like we kind of God, He has expectation towards us. So we have different mission. Not only delivering or evangelizing, but being a blessing. Living out the gospel. As His disciples. So that's why discipleship and following Jesus. That's also important, because our life should be all transformed. So the biblical word is holiness, and it is as much as a part of our missionary identity as of our personal sanctification. So does it not lead to works righteousness and legalism? Surely we should concentrate exclusively on calling people to faith. So this is important part. I'm going to ask Monique, can you read this part?
Paul, 오빠 그것 좀 줄여줘. Paul saw only integration when he described his own life's mission as calling all the nations to faith obedience. The gospel is something to obey, according to Paul, not just believed.
Yeah. Please, give your attention here. Paul evangelized and shared the gospel, but he wants to see like integration. That means all nations. The people who become Christians at the first century, they've got to be more obedient. And the all nations, even the enemy nations and those pagans and Gentiles, they've got to be obeying God and honoring God. So the gospel is something we've got to obey. Gospel itself has a power to change people. So we are not just logically or using our mind or our reason, but we become more obedient, and all nations to face obedience. So I'm going to read a Korean part. 사도 바울은 그는 자신의 인생의 사명이 모든 열방을 믿음의 순종으로 이끄는 것이라고 했다. 즉 복음은 단지 믿어야 하는 것이 아니라 바울에 따르면 순종해야 하는 것이다. So gospel is something we should be obey, and it's kind of beyond just belief, that belief system. So what are the priorities and the limits of our mission? Here, what's our priority? Maybe some people think evangelical work and proclamation is more important than your presence. And what's the real job? And maybe delivering the message is the real job, and sustaining our creation and taking care of our members and doing the medical mission, those can be the secondary, subsidiary work. So people may think, this is the more important job, priority in mission, and the others, rest of parts are just the secondary work. Yeah, maybe people can make that kind of category, but he is explaining that proclamation, you see this part, proclamation is as important as our presence. So both are equally important. Social action, social work, and all sorts of other mission work is also important and significant as evangelism. So how big is God, your gospel? So he's giving an explanation that God is a redeemer, as you see, but we cannot just say, gospel has only power to convert other religious people to Christianity. It's not just limited to individual scope, because gospel, it has a power. So not only making the sinners holy and sinners are redeemed by Jesus, his work, but here the gospel is not only just solution for the individual sins problem, but we've got to think gospel itself has all good news. Why don't we read this part? Lucy, can you read this part?
We find that the Bible itself will correct our tendency to reduce the Gospels to the solutions to our individual sin problem. and the swap of card for the heaven's door, and replace that reductionist impressions with message that has to do with the cosmic regions of God in Christ that will ultimately eradicate evil from God's universe and solve our individual sin problems too, of course.
So he's saying, God's his scope of mission is a universal. So what we are doing is a cosmic reign of God. We proclaim, and what we are doing is in every aspect of our, creation, we can contribute, to make God's creation more sustainable and make God's people more, more holy and become more like Jesus. There are certain ways, not only evangelize and not only, convert people. So what we are doing is can be all the mission, the part of God's mission work. And no other name. This is the last subsection. So he is explaining that knowing our God is important because mission of God start from himself and his heart, and what we are doing as a missionary and as his people, we are called to share God's people, share the gospel. But if we do not know exactly who God is, we cannot share the gospel exactly. So first, we know God is a sender and he is the initiator of all mission. Second, God himself is the content of the gospel. So when we share the gospel, the main content is God himself. If we know God well, then our content should be more bountiful because we know God well. So these are the main thing. So like when we think of the mission of God's people, that's is from God himself. And also as we see in part 2 and part 3, like we're going to deal with God. He is the source and motivation of the whole mission, and also he is the content of our gospel, and we are called as God's his people as a missionary. Even though we are not professional missionaries, not supported by the church as a missionary, but our whole life should be more missional, and every areas, every areas or every our work must be mission field. So that's what he said. So that's chapter 1, and chapter 2 we're going to deal with next week. It's more about core redemption history. This is your homework. You've got to read this part. Chapter 2 is people who know the story they are part of. So we are part of God's redemption story. So chapter 2 is your assignment. Please read, and then we can discuss. Because today I assume that many of you guys didn't really look through it. So chapter 1 is about our identity as God's people and what's the difference mission and missions, singular and plural. And when we talk about mission field and missionary, what's the old concept and new concept, he is explaining. So can we actually have some discussion time? What do you think? Yeah, some are late, but like how was your reaction? What do you think about God's people and their identity, and he's kind of challenging us to change and transform our old concept, old paradigm of mission and missionary and mission field. So what do you think? Boram, Paul, Linda, Lucy, Monique. You give your you know, your own idea. From Linda. Linda, are you listening?
Yeah, I'm listening.
Yeah.
Yeah, through today's listen, I think a mission field is everywhere. It's very touching me. Yeah, I thought the mission was a go to somewhere, not in normal way, not in our normal life, but I heard a mission is everywhere. It means mission also in our home. Yeah, my father is very easy to anger. I really dislike that kind of character, and I can endure 참다, endure once, but twice and every time he always get anger. I cannot bear it. But as a missionary, I think I should endure my father more. It is also a mission, I think. Yeah.
Yes, and next. Since Linda said her dad is easy to anger, when my dad, not that easy to anger, but when he do, 그냥 한국말로 할게요.
네.
비꼬는 된 선수예요.
비꼬는 he's very sarcastic.
sarcastic.
예. 이게 이런저런 다시 영어로 이렇게 이런저런 정말 이해할 수 없게 사람을 꼬은다든지 등등 해가지고 엄마가 빡이 쳤던 적이 여러 번이 있는데도 불구하고 잠깐만 이거 기록 끄셔야죠.
왜?
빡이 친다는 게 기록돼.